Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today for my first eyeshadow palette review of the year. Now I do have quite a few that I do want to review over the next probably couple of months. It's going to take me a little while. So I've got two Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes that I picked up in like Christmas sales, and then I got the Melt, what is this? Impulsive palette that I haven't used. Haven't used any of these because I've set them aside to do a review on, but the one that I want to start with, because this is the one that I was most excited for and that I was saving up my pennies for, is the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. So yeah, I haven't actually, in the last few months, I wasn't super inspired by eyeshadow palettes, but I heard really great things about this one, which was the Natasha Denona holiday release. So it's still available, but it is a limited edition palette. So once it's gone, I don't know if they'll bring it back. Sometimes they do, most of the times they don't. So this is a bit of a splurge. I think it's around 200 Australian dollars. So I did wait for a sale and I made sure I got it on sale because it's very expensive. This is the box. So it's this dark sort of metallic sort of teal look to it, which is kind of cool. And the difference between this palette and some past palettes is this is the first time they've done midi pans. So they've done mini pans before and the normal size pans, whereas these ones are mid-sized. So they're bigger than the small ones, smaller than the big ones, which I do like. I think this amount of product is enough. So there are 28 shades in here and the total weight of the palette is 38.45 grams. So that's the weight of the eyeshadows, which comes down to just under 1.4 grams in eyeshadow, which is pretty much a standard pan eyeshadow. So if you buy like the single, I think they're 26 millimeter eyeshadow pans, you generally get about 1.5 grams. So as a consumer, I actually think this format's a lot better. If you do compare it to something like the gold palette, which has, I think 15 shades. So you're getting 13 shades more in here. These are bigger pans that are 2.5 grams per pan. You can see the size difference there. And realistically, I would prefer to have less eyeshadow in a pan and more variety than larger pans and less variety, because I think these palettes are roughly the same amount of, like, same price. So I like this format a lot better. I want to see her do more of these. So what I normally do with these reviews, they're sort of like the 1 week, 1 palette reviews, and generally I try to make them go for a week, but because there are so many eyeshadow shades in here and there is quite a lot of variety, which is great to see, I predict that I'll be using this for longer than 7 days. So this palette review might take me a couple of weeks to do, but let's get on to looking at the palette. So again, like I said, this is that sort of faux leather, but it's like a metallic teal color. It's the same sort of foam design. It's quite sleek, quite sturdy. Same design as like the other sort of bigger palettes. This is, like I said, the gold one. It does have a mirror. It's not a fantastic mirror. I don't really see the point of it too much. It does have a covering on it, but it's not huge. It does have a sheet over the top that tells you the shade names, but that easily, you can either rip it off or just hold it up, which is what I tend to do. And you can see the shades here. So there's actually a really nice amount of variety in here. If you compare it to some of their other, like some of her other palettes that are sort of like one capsule color story. So for example, like I said, the gold palette, which is browns, golds, and a couple of teals. This has more of the gold palette side here. So you have the golds, the browns, couple of teals, but you also have more of the Natasha Denona sunset palette vibes here. So you've got oranges, you've got the reds, you've got the sort of warm shades as well as a pop of blue, navy, dark forest green, which is really different. I love this green here. So if you do have a lot of her palettes, you'll find that there's probably quite redundant shades here. I don't think any of them are double ups, but you can get some very similar looks with some of her other palettes. But I think this is a nice sort of capsule palette if you haven't tried her formula. So I am pretty sick of pops of color palettes. So palettes that have like one color story and then like a pop of blue, because I often find that the colors don't work well together. But in this instance, like, okay, here it looks ridiculous with the warm shades with the pop of blue. But if you did use those shades like down here, they actually do work. So even though there's pops of color here, it is sort of, or it can organically work with the shades in the palette, which I think is good. As per usual, Natasha Denona tend to mix a lot of different formulas into their palettes. So there's not just one standard formula for the mattes and one standard formula for the shimmers. It's almost like over time, they just try a bunch of different formulas, and a lot of their different palettes have completely different formulas. So that's why there are so many ingredients lists here. So all of these are different formulations. All right, so let's swatch this palette, and then what I'll do is I'll create a look on my eyes, sort of first impression, let you know what I think about it, and then check back in over different days to show you the looks I've created and explain what shades I've used. Then when I've used all the shades and I have a good idea of what I think about the palette, I will conclude what my review is. So with the swatches, I'm going to apply them just with my fingers onto bare skin, and I'm going to do a row at a time. So that's how I'm going to do it. All right, something to note here is that sort of army green color is more like a cream. So it's really interesting. It's like a cream to powder sort of formulation, which is, I think there's a few of them in this palette. That's another cream one here, and this is a duochrome there as well. So we're starting to see different finishes pop up. All right, so the top row is very autumn inspired. The reds and the greens actually look really beautiful together. And we have started to see some of the different formulations. So this is quite a metallic shimmer. These are two sort of cream to powder products, duochrome. These are more standard shimmers, and this one here is a matte. So we're seeing a bit of variation there, and they swatch beautifully, all of them. Gorgeous. Again, these two are those cream formulas, and I don't think we have any duochromes here. This is a really soft sort of champagne, almost peachy shade, but it's very, very soft, so it's hard to see on my skin because it matches. This one's a matte here. Very pretty. Whoa, so that's super sparkly. It feels almost creamy and foiled. And it's a very, like, almost glittery, it's a foiled shade. It looks really intense and beautiful. This is more of your standard sort of smooth shimmer without that sort of sparkle. Hopefully you can see. And here's another one that looks almost foiled. It's very, very, very sparkly. Gorgeous. Look at that first one. All right, out of the next four, there's 3 creams. So green is a cream. Holy shit, look at that. Look at that, it's crazy. This is just a shimmer, a copper shimmer. This is a cream. Whoa, that's crazy as well. It looks like ink. And then this brown is also a cream formula. Very interesting. I wonder how these like apply with a brush, and I wonder how long they last without drying out. I'm very curious because they're really, they look really cool. All right, last row, once again, we've got a couple of creams here. This first brown is a cream, and this color's going really funny. Sorry guys, I'll see if I can color correct this. It's looking quite blue. This is a beautiful sort of shimmery, it's not even a forest green because it's quite blue toned, and it's got some like silver sparkle in it as well. It's really pretty. And then this one is, as you can see, a cream. It looks kind of similar to the last two that I swatched on the top row, like the row above it, but it looks like a mix between the two. So this is more like a really dark teal rather than a navy or a green. All right, we've got a mustard sort of yellowy orangey matte there. We've got a beautiful, oh, it's like a gorgeous metallic red. Got a beautiful sparkly sort of, I don't know, apricot sort of orange color, and a dark sort of warm cream brown. That's quite a reddy brown. So there we go. 3 sort of cream shades there. 1 matte, sparkle. This is probably sparkle too, and that's like a nice metallic. So a lot of sort of variety in texture, and they all swatch beautifully. And I just thought I'd show you that the pan stayed pretty nice and clean after swatching. So these are not eyeshadows that you need to pick up a lot of product. You need to like really dip into. You literally touch them and they pick up really beautifully. Like I'm just touching it really slightly and it's picking up a lot. So these aren't super powdery. They look like they're really well behaved. And you have a lot of these sort of cream formulas. Some of these really highly sort of metallic foiled formulas. Standard shimmers, mattes, you've got a whole bunch of different stuff here. So there we go. All right, so I'm thinking I want to try all sort of formulas today, but I might delve into sort of the greens first and some of these sort of cooler toned browns. I'm really interested in that sort of element of this palette. So that might be what I demonstrate, but I'll try to delve into a bunch of different textures. As per usual, we're starting with an eyeshadow primer. I'm using my NARS. This is the Tinted Smudge Proof eyeshadow base in the shade medium. So I'm just going to put that on really, really quickly. All right, one thing I've already noticed about this palette, there's no shade to just like set my base a little bit. I like to set just the crease to make it easier to blend. The closest shade I have is Rope. So this is more of a matte, I don't know, like almost soft caramel color. So I'm just going to put that in very lightly in the crease just to set that base a little bit. It does suit my skin tone quite nicely, but it is quite dark. So for that, I just used a fluffy brush from Morphe. This is the M441. And what I've done is I've just wiped that off on my color switch. And I'm going in with one of the cream shades. Now I want to see if I can put the cream shade in the crease with a fluffy brush. I'm not sure if I can, but I'm really curious to see how it does work. So I'm getting a bit of the green. So this is the shade Lethal, and I just want to see how it works with a fluffy brush, just using it as a standard matte. It actually applies really nicely. I've set my base so it's going on top of a powder, but it's not going on patchy. It's blending really nicely. I just picked up the smallest amount, so I didn't sort of overwhelm it, but that's applying really beautifully. This sort of cream to powder formula is really nice. I'm quite surprised. All right, I'm loving that color. I think it's a really nice swampy green. It looks nice and even, blended out so nicely. Very happy with it. Now I want to go with like an intense sort of shimmer on the lid, and then I want to delve into a bit more of that sort of dark creamy green. So the shade I used in the crease was that one, but I might use these three on the lid. So I'm thinking this duochrome can go on the inner portion, this can be on the majority of the lid, and this can be on the outer portion. All right, this is just a ColourPop brush. This is the E4. So I'm going to start with that mid-tone shade. I'm just going to sort of put that all over the lid. This picks up so nicely, and I'm using a very cheap brush. So if this is picking up this nicely and applying this nicely, it is a nice eyeshadow. It's not the brush that's helping it out, so that's great. This applies super easily. It's a really nice sort of olivey brown color. All right, I'm just running some of that color just on the lower lash line as well. Not too much, just a little bit. All right, with the same brush, I'm just using that creamy shade Troop. So just to add a little bit more definition into the corner. This is actually really nice because it adds a little bit more green. So it sort of complements or sort of brings together the crease, which is a lot more green, and the lid. And once again, this cream actually applies nicely with a more flat brush as well, which is great to see. So this is a really pretty shade. All right, just a little bit, just near the lash line to really define the lower lash line a bit, not too much. I'm just gonna go in with that duochrome shade just to pop in the inner corner as a bit of sort of brightness. It's actually really interesting because where my palette is currently sitting, it almost has a pink look to it, like a beigey pink look. But when I'm putting it on the eyes, it has this sort of greeny gold effect. So definitely is a subtle duochrome. It's just a nice sort of topper shade to add a little bit of like sparkle and brightness to a look. It doesn't have a base color, so you can just sort of place it over any color, and it would actually grip really nicely to those sort of cream eyeshadows. But there we go, a bit of brightness. All right, I'm really liking this look, and on a normal day, I would totally stop there, just put some liner on, some mascara, and off I go, because I love this sort of like grungy, greeny brown color. But I do want to try this sort of foresty cream green on camera. So I've just wiped off that brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that and I'm going to run it on the sort of lash line and yeah, around the lash line to see what effect it gives the look. All right, so I know that these are quite pigmented, so I'm picking up the smallest amount. What I do like about this being a sort of cream formula is I'm not worried about fallout. Often with these really, really dark shades, you get a bit concerned that fallout's going to ruin everything. But since this is a cream, I know that I sort of am painting it on, but it's not a wet cream. It's sort of like a dry cream, so it goes on a bit like a powder, but yeah, it's actually really, really beautiful. This could work as a liner as well. I'm really digging it. So I'm going to sort of give it a liner shape. Again, I'm just picking up the smallest amount just to sort of blend in so I'm not being overwhelmed by the color. All right, so I've sort of mimicked sort of a liner a little bit with that one. You can see how different that effect is to this. I really like this look, but if you want to ramp it up, you can go the green. And I really like this cream formula because like I said, you can really control it. It grips to the eye, but it blends like a powder, but there's no fallout. So I'm not worried about my base, which is really nice. All right, I tried my hardest to mimic the other side. That's the hardest thing. You do something fancy and then you're like, damn it, I can't mimic it on the other side. But I think that all applied so easily and I think it looks really stunning. I think because I've sort of mimicked a bit of this sort of liner effect. I don't actually know if I'll put liner on. I might just go away, put some color on my waterline because I don't like that sort of fleshy color to it. I want something a bit darker. I'll put some mascara and some half lashes and we'll see how the final look is. All right, here's the look just with some mascara and some half lashes. So I've just plopped some half lashes on the outer corners there. And the green does a really good job at sort of emphasizing the eye shape that liner will give you. You could even use a liner brush with that sort of cream formula and do liner, which is really fantastic because these cream products are so pigmented. You saw them in the swatches, like they're like ink. So you can really use them as liner if you actually don't know how to use them otherwise. But I really like this color combination. Every shade applied really nicely. I use matte in the crease originally. I use the cream formula, that sort of greeny color. I use the standard shimmer. I use the duochrome shimmer. I use those sort of really pigmented dark creams and I think everything applied really beautifully. I'm actually quite surprised. I'll conclude this in a second when I'm zoomed out, but I just wanted to say that, like, you know, using this shade as a liner or this shade as a liner would be perfection. So I'm really, really, really digging the formulas in here and they apply really beautifully. All right, so this is a look zoomed out and I definitely think this like scratches my sort of murky green itch that I've had for a while. I think this palette so far I'm very impressed with. Like I said, all the formulas applied beautifully. I am a little bit concerned about the creams not lasting as long as a regular eyeshadow. So for example, if you want to have this palette for 5 years, you might find that the creams will start to dry out and become unusable. But at the same time, this is designed to be like only last 2 years, like most eyeshadow palettes. So yeah, I would not be deterred by the cream formula in this because it actually works a treat on the eyes and it's something that I don't know, almost like cream eyeshadows aren't really my jam and I've avoided them for the longest time. If cream eyeshadows were all like this, I would be fine with it because they are beautiful. I will be able to check back, you know, in coming days and let you know what these sort of, if they transfer on the eye or whatnot, because I will have to sort of take some of the other shades that are creams and put them all over the lid and really test to see if they crease throughout the day. But so far, I'm loving every shade I used. All right, we're back with look number 2, and this is a fairly sort of bold look because we're filming beauty news today, so I tend to go more of a bold look. I will do some more sort of natural looks with this palette as well, but today I decided to go a little bit more orange. So yesterday I went greens, today I wanted to go orange. So the shades that I used, I originally put, I had to put this color in the crease sort of to set the base. It was a little bit too dark and it did cling to the base a little bit. So I think this is not this one, this is a better option for me to set my base. But what I might also do in the future is just reach for like another cream eyeshadow, a matte cream eyeshadow, because there's none in here. Because I feel like that's going to be like a daily issue that I can't set my base properly. Anyway, so I use this to set my base, and I also used it to blend out the colors. So the one that I've got sort of diffused into the crease is this yellow shade here. Then I went all over the lid with this sort of coppery shade. So there's a lot of oranges here. There's a lot of redundant oranges I'm noticing. So whether it's more of a sparkly orange, whether it's more of sparkly orange or matte or cream, there's a lot of oranges. So I went for this particular one all over the lid. Blended out a little bit with that matte. So that is not a cream shade, it's one of the matte powders. So I put that right in the crease. You can see that sort of dark orangey shade. Put those shades on the lower lash line as well. And then what I wanted to do was go in with a little bit of shimmer. So you can see that there's a bit of brightness on my lid and on my inner corner. And I went for this sort of really foiled shade. So that's the one that's swatched almost like a wet foiled sort of swatch. I put a little bit of this, just tapped it on the lid so it's not as foiled and intense as it can be. I used more of a sort of glitter topper type product. Then I also put it on the inner corner a little bit more intense with a pencil brush. And then the last thing I did was I used this cream dark brown here just in the outer corner and lower lash line, just to sort of ground the look because it was looking very, very orange and warm. So yeah, just as a recap, I've used this shade, that shade in the crease, a little bit of brown in the outer corner, and this foiled shade as like a topper inner corner highlight. So I am trying to use quite a few shades in each look so I can sort of get through a lot of the shades in the palette. But yeah, I sort of went more these red tones, orangey tones today. And this is a look, you can really see the gold sparkle. You can really see that sort of yellow that I used to blend out. You can really see the matte orange. The dark brown is more, it was just more to like sort of mute the look down a little bit. You can't really see it too much. Gold is popping. I sort of covered most of that sort of coppery shade on the lid, so you can't really see it too much, but I do think that these all applied really nicely. It's a really sort of statement orangey gold sort of look. I like it. I think, once again, I've had no issues with formula. Everything worked really nicely. I just love sort of like a matte cream to really set the crease before I put on any sort of crease color, but it's not in there, so it is what it is. But we'll be back tomorrow with another look. All right, day number 3, and I decided to go a more brown look. I originally just wanted to use this row down here, so I did use that row, but I added in another color. I also used just a cream matte color to set my crease because this doesn't have one, which is a little bit frustrating. So I thought I would put that all over the lid, but then I decided no, today's a day that I want to test what the creams are like all over the lid, and I can check back in tomorrow and let you know if they crease. So all on the lid, I've put this color all over the lid, this color sort of in the crease and the outer corner a little bit more. I did put that shimmery brown on the lower lash line. It's not super shimmery, and it's very similar to this color. So I feel like that is one of the first sort of redundant shades that I've seen, because the top color and the bottom color look almost identical. They're just slightly different finishes. And then I put a little bit of that shimmery white on the inner corner. It's not a super shimmery shade. It sort of applies, it's quite powdery, and it sort of applies more like just a sheer sort of shimmer. So a lot of it did disappear, but it just brightened up that sort of inner section a little bit. So I originally just wanted to go brown, did that. Then, and hopefully you'll see when I zoom in a little bit, I put my liner on. I thought my liner was a little bit harsh. I wanted something pretty dark to blend out the liner a little bit. And I noticed that all the really dark shades in this palette, it's like teal, green, and dark blue. So one thing I am missing in this palette is a really rich, maybe like dark chocolate brown shade that you could use as a liner that's not a color. So that's something that I was missing, and it was a little bit frustrating because when I used the 4 shades, there's 2 that look very similar. Yet we're missing a basic cream and we're missing a really rich dark brown. So there's a lot of sort of like darker browns, but not quite as dark as I was hoping. So I actually went in with that dark blue cream shade. just to sort of blend on the sort of lash line and lower lash line. So hopefully you'll see a little bit of depth there, and it's actually the navy blue. It did work really nicely with the browns, but yeah, I would have liked a rich kind of like, I don't know, coffee bean brown or something, or like a dark rich chocolate brown, but yeah, we don't have it. So yeah, brown and blue. Again, the cream texture colors blended really, really nicely. So that brown blended beautifully over a powder sort of cream matte color that I put on first, just from a single, and it just blended beautifully. It applied on the eye really nicely. You can just see a little bit of brightness from that light color. I don't know if you can see the textural difference on the lower lash line versus the lid, but the lid is matte. And I'm not sure if you can see the touch of sort of dark blue just sort of near the liner and on the lower lash line, just to sort of blend that liner out a little bit. I might brighten this so we can see it a bit more, but there's a little touch of sort of bluey sort of green color in there, because the brown and the blue mixed together to make more of a green kind of color. But that's what I created. I think it's a really pretty look, and it worked really nicely. I just, yeah, once again, sort of redundant shades and missing shades that I would like, but I'll be able to test to see if this creases. All right, next look, and the lighting's really weird today. It's making me look very, very fair. It's really sunny outside and quite dark in here, so I blame that. But anyway, I tried to go a fairly nude look today because I'm just catching up with some people for brunch. I didn't want to wear too much makeup, but I ended up wearing a bit of makeup because I realized this palette is kind of hard to get nude looks out of. Like, there are nude shades, but they're very gold or very orange. So besides the looks that I used yesterday, which mind you, I didn't notice any creasing of the cream shades. I will try to test it again and maybe layer it a little bit heavier, but they performed like just a powder. So again, I had to set my base with a different cream matte because there was none in here, and I thought, look, I can go brown again. I don't want to do that. So I went this shade here all over the lid. It applied really nicely. It adhered to the base really, really easily, blended really nicely. And then I wanted, once again, something a little bit more neutral transition. The only one I could find was this one or the yellow. So again, I'm finding some limitations with creating full looks with this palette. I didn't want to go this one because I'd used it before, so I tried this cream brown. So it did actually apply quite nicely, and because the cream can be buffed out really easily, it can be either intense or can be quite faded. This ended up turning into quite a like interesting sort of like murky yellowy brown, which I didn't really expect. I don't know if you can see it on camera, and I'll zoom in so hopefully you can see it. So yeah, this color here almost has like a, I don't know, yellowy olivey tone to it, and blended out. It's interesting. It just wasn't the color that I was expecting. Then I was like, I really want an inner corner highlight. The only one is this one. I didn't love it yesterday because it wasn't, look, I don't want a really frosty inner corner highlight, but I want a light one that can sort of brighten a look. And if you take away this shade, there's none. They're all sort of very yellowy gold colors. So you've got a foiled, really intense one. You have more of a duochrome here, or you have golds. So I was like, I have to go gold. So I decided to try, which one did I go? I went this one here. So if we turn the palette upside down, I used this one. That's that foiled one I used that first time or in a previous look. But this is a really yellow gold. So I put that just on the inner corner, and I really intensified it sort of on the lower lash line a bit. So yeah, only 3 shades. Taupe shade, brown shade, and gold shade. So this is a look close up. You can see that taupey shade all over the lid. Hopefully you can see that sort of almost yellowy, olivey, ooh, unruly brow hairs. That sort of like almost like healed bruise look in the crease. I don't mind that color. I just wasn't sort of expecting it from that brown. But it gives you that sort of, yeah, healed bruise, sort of yellowy, greeny color. All right, we're on to week number 2, where I'm going to do at least another 4 looks using this palette, and then I'll reassess if I need to do any more. But today I really wanted to test the sort of wear of the creams. So I had some early morning appointments today, so I did my makeup at about 6:30. It's about 2:30 now, so what is that? So 8 hours later, I can tell you how these creams wear just on a normal primer. So all I did today was I used this shade here all over the lid. So that's that sort of tangerine orange color. I put a little bit of this color just on the lower lash line and out of corner, and put some mascara on. So the prominent look is this one shade. So like I said, I did put it over normal primer, and I did pack it on. Like originally I sort of put it on with a sort of fluffy brush into the crease, and then I sort of packed it on the lid to make it a little bit more vibrant, and so we can really test to see if it creases. And I think there's a tiny bit of creasing, but nothing major, so we'll zoom in. So hopefully you can see the tangerine color did apply quite nice and vibrant. One thing I did notice about it was it wasn't hard to build it up to a solid color, but I found that whenever I'd sort of blend it, it blends really seamlessly, like it just wants to blend itself. So it's sort of, you need to sort of pack it on to build it up. Now there is a very, very minute amount of creasing just in here and just in here. Now you can't see it super well on this eye because I've got that little sort of mark from skin irritation. But if I look down, hopefully you can see that just here there is a little bit of creasing and just a little bit there. But I really think that after 8 hours of wear, that's not that big a deal at all. You can hopefully see it. It will be a little bit more prominent if you wore it with like a darker color. So if you wore that sort of like navy color, you'd probably see that wearing a little bit more than if it was just this sort of peachy brown color on my skin tone. But it's wearing pretty damn well for a cream product. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It feels touch dry, so it does sort of feel like powder. Of course, if you sort of rub your eyes, there's going to be a little bit of pickup, but everything else is sort of, it applies really nicely. It's a nice formula. All right, so we're back with a fairly bold look because it is a beauty news filming day. I really wanted to delve into some of these greens. So this green and that green, that's what I used, yes. Because I thought, look, they're bold greens. What's the chances I'm going to use them to the supermarket? Probably slim, so I thought I'd use them today. So essentially what I used was, look, I started out with this gold, which is sort of like a sparkly yellow gold, and it's actually, it's not a super metallic shade. It's like just a bunch of very, very fine, like glittery metallic particles. So you can build it up like it's metallic, or if you used it more sparingly, you can actually sort of use it as a topper, if that makes sense. So it almost shears out to like little flecks of gold glitter and a clear base, which I really like that, because one thing I'm noticing about this palette is that you can get different effects as you layer things. So once again, if you just build that up as a color, it looks gold. If you sort of layer it on top of another color, it can create like a topper sort of effect. So yeah, one thing I'm liking about this palette is the mix of different textures. So I started with that on the inner corner, just on normal primer. Then I wanted to go in with this green sort of dark teal color here. Now this was fairly easy to apply. I did find though that having to pack it on a bit, I was getting a little bit of fallout because it's a dark color. So I ended up spraying my brush with some finishing spray, and I applied that more foiled. So it did apply beautifully foiled. It didn't seal the pan. It was really nice. Then I went in with this green cream shade just to deepen the outer corner a little bit and to take away some of like the really metallic look that I had going on. Now I do have to say, when applied, they look quite similar in color. So similar to what I meant by like this one and that one being similar in color when applied to the lid. It's just like a different finish. So if I take this color, for example, and this color, you can see that they have a different finish, but when you do sort of blend them out, they have sort of a similar color. That one sort of mixed a little bit, but they do have like a similar color to them. So all the sort of cream shade really did was add a different sort of texture to the same color, which, you know, some people might think that's frustrating because you've got something that on the eye gives a similar color. But I also thought it was a really nice pairing, the two of them. And in the future, if I wanted to go a bold green look, instead of using this shade sort of foiled like I did, I would probably use this as a base and then put that over the top to really intensify it. So you can sort of play with texture with those two, but they do give a similar look to the eye. Then what I wanted to do was tone it down a little bit because I had so much sort of green going on that I added in this color up here, which was a beautiful transition between the gold shade and the green shade. So that one there just worked really nicely. Do I have a spare finger? I do. So it's sort of like a gold green. So on the lid, I've sort of got that between the gold and the green. Then, because I wanted to sort of blend it out and sort of change the shape of the look, because I find these sort of dark looks often make my eyes kind of look a little bit beady, I used this matte shade and I sort of blended it out a little bit. So you'll see it in the crease. I've taken it quite far up. So it's not quite to my brow bone, but it's pretty far up just to sort of change the shape of the look. So that's what I've used today. So here you can really see that sort of tan color that I've used to really sort of diffuse the eye and sort of change the shape, because if I didn't put that, these would look kind of beady if it's just sort of kept to my sort of lid space area. So that has really opened it up and made my eyes look a lot bigger. You can see the greens, so a mix of the sort of cream and also the shimmer, as well as on the lower lash line. Hopefully you can see the gold, and then next to the gold is that sort of, it almost looks like an antiqued gold look, but it was that sort of army green color just used to sort of work the two together, because I just found that the gold to the green looked really harsh, whereas that really pretty olivey greeny sort of shade really helped transition it. So that's a look. Like I said, you can go a lot more intense if you wanted to, but I did tone it down a little bit. I also used a sort of green liner just from Maybelline on my waterline, and just a sort of dark brown wing line. I did take the wing quite far out to once again sort of shape the eye so it didn't look so beady, but I really love these greens because you can see how they make my eyes look a lot more warmer. So they really play off the sort of warm tones in my eye color, and that's why greens are really, really beautiful on like hazel or brown eyes. So yeah, that's my greeny look. All right, we're back for look, I think it's number 7, and I've got one more that I want to do before I conclude this. Now, today was a little bit uninspired. I sort of feel like I'm using leftover shades and sort of redundant shades, if that makes sense. So I feel like I had to actually go back through the footage that I've sort of filmed over the last couple of weeks and mark the shades that I already had used, because I feel like when I look at this palette, because there are so many oranges and so many golds, I wasn't quite sure which ones I had used and hadn't used, because they sort of look similar and they create very similar looks. So today I decided to create a warm look with some leftover shades that I hadn't touched yet. And then tomorrow I want to use this blue and this red, which are pretty much the only shades left now that I haven't used. So along with that gold there, those are the only shades that I haven't used. So I'll be using those 3 shades in my look tomorrow. Now, I was going to use one of the blue or the purple in my look today, but then I thought, no, I really want to sort of challenge myself, because the way I've sort of been seeing this palette is you either have a warm color with a pop of blue, which is what I've actually done today, or you have golds and greens. So I really wanted to see how I can mix the blue and the red, which are more unusual shades, in this palette together in one look with that gold that I didn't use. So that's what's happening tomorrow, and it might be a complete failure, but it is what it is. But what I've done today, like I said, I've sort of just picked the leftover shades that felt really redundant and thrown them in one look. So this look I don't particularly love. It's not bad, but once again, it really reminds me of how sort of repetitive this palette can get. So the shades I ended up using just because I had them left over to use. So I started with this shade down here, just in the inner half of the look, and then I went to this shade up here for the main part of the lid. Now, they're both shimmery, sort of coppery, orangey shades. So even though they do look slightly different, one looks a little bit more peach and one looks a little bit more copper. Effectively on the eye, they look very similar. So yeah, one's more warm, one's more peach. So I put the more peach on the inner corner and that sort of warmer shade on the lid. But they do blend together to look very, very similar. The nuances in the differences are so minute that you do not need both shades, and once it is applied to the lid and sort of blend it out and you sort of blend them together a bit, it ends up starting to look like one color. So that look, yeah, it really did highlight that there's a lot of repetitive shades in here, and once again, even though they're not identical, I feel like they're close enough that they don't need to be in the palette. And the thing is, it's not even that those are the only coppery shades. We also have like one here and sort of a yellowy coppery shade there. So it sort of feels like you're being bombarded with a lot of similar colors. So another color that I hadn't used. So when I did that look with the one sort of cream color all over the lid, I used this one here, but I didn't use this shade at all. This is another cream color. And once again, it is just a burnt orangey shade. I put that sort of in the outer corner in the crease. And again, it is so similar to this one. It is, you kind of ask, why are they both in the same palette? So again, there are slight nuances. One's a little bit more red toned, one's a little bit more yellow toned, but I do not think you need them both. It really takes up space. And because there are, in my opinion, limitations to shades that they haven't put in, I don't understand why they've wasted so much space with like same colors with very similar finishes. So yeah, I used that because I had to. I did also reach for this gold shade here. It is not much different to the other gold shades around it. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit less yellow than this one, but a little bit more yellow than these two. There's too many golds. So I just used that shade just to give a little bit more texture difference and add a little bit more brightness to the inner corner. Again, one limitation to this palette is there's really only one highlight shade. And there's a lot of mid-tone colors here, and even though predominantly I do like mid-tones, I would like to see at least like a champagne gold or something that you can add a bit more vibrancy without it being like a really rich gold. So, and then the last shade that I wanted to use, I actually thought I'd use this, but I realized looking back I hadn't. So I'd used the green, I'd used the navy, I hadn't used this dark teal color. Now again, because these are creams, I sort of think it's a little bit redundant to have the three because the colors are quite similar, and being a cream, you could so easily mix the green with the navy to get the dark teal. So I feel like even though I used the dark teal, it applied very similar to using the blue. And if I really wanted a more greeny teal sort of version of it, I could just mix the green with the blue. So I don't understand why there's the three here. I was a bit like, haven't we been here before? But so pretty much I'll show you the differences. That's, I think, the teal that I used today. I'll see. Yeah, that's the teal I used today. That's the green. That's the sort of blue. The blue and the teal, like if you actually just blend out the blue, it gives a very similar color anyway. And then if you wanted to add a little bit more green, being a cream, it's so easy to do. So I still feel like this, again, is like a wasted pan. But what I did with that today to make it a little bit more different is I actually used it as a liner. So I used a liner brush. I lined my eye with it. I have to say that it did give a decent effect. It's not super bold. I don't expect it to be very long wearing. I'm sure I'll wear fine, but if you're, you know, if there's a lot of moisture happening, if your eyes tear up, if whatever it happens to be, if it's raining, it is technically an eyeshadow, so it's not like a waterproof, budge-proof gel liner. It also didn't give the opacity and the crispness that a gel liner gives. So I did realize that it took quite a lot to build up to get the color opacity. So I'll show you a bit closer up. Then when I stepped back and I looked at the look, it was very, very, very orange, and I wanted to ground it a little bit. So on the lower lash line and in the crease, just to create more of a sort of dimension, I added this dark brown. Now, what I also realized is that all the dark sort of nude shades are all creams. So for example, this is cream, that's cream, that's cream, that's cream. So I like the cream formula, but I really would have liked to have seen some, firstly, as I said the other day, a darker brown, but I would have liked to have seen some of these darker colors with a powder formula, because I feel like you're sort of stuck with powder shimmers and then matte creams. There's very few sort of matte powders, and I would have really liked to have that versatility in here, to have both textures. So I found that a little bit frustrating, and I went back to this shade just to deepen it a little bit and add a little bit more dimension, because I was kind of looking a bit neon orange. All right, so zoomed in, hopefully you can see the orange all over the lid. There are technically 3 oranges, 1 cream, 2 shimmers, and they sort of all just blend into one. I do have that gold on the inner corner for that sort of added texture that I wasn't sort of getting any variation on the lid. You can see that I've added a little bit of depth with that dark cream brown here and just right into the crease. And on my top lash line is that teal cream color. You can see that it did apply quite nicely. It did mix quite a lot with the shadow underneath, so it took on a bit of shimmer. And it's not super crisp, it's not super bold. It did take a few sort of layers and sort of patching up to get it to be as intense as I wanted. I did use a pencil liner on the waterline. So I used this one from Revlon. It's the cream gel in, I think it's something Island, Private Island. Yeah, Private Island. So this is a really beautiful color that wears really nicely on the waterline, and it sort of matches the teal really well. So overall, I don't hate this look. I think my issue with the look is that I used 3 oranges. They all look the same, and I could have used a number of other oranges from the palette and got the same look. I could have also used that navy to get this same look. So it was sort of, I felt like I was using leftover shades, if that makes sense. All right, so we're back with the last look of the palette, and today I wanted to use the blue and the red, so that's what I did. So I think they were the last 2 shades I needed to use. I wasn't sure if I needed to use this gold as well because I thought it was a gap, but I think I already marked it, so I feel like maybe... Anyway, I used that gold as well just in case I hadn't used it in the past. So what I did on my eyes today was I used this shimmery brown all over the lid and on the lower lash line just as a base. I did set my base with a matte cream single because there are none in this palette. But then I did go over my normal primer with this one. And then what I decided to do was put the gold on the inner corner. So this sort of yellowy gold on the inner corner, which I'll zoom in and show you. The 2 shades I needed to use was the blue and the red. So these are both shimmery shade. So I used the red on the lower lash line in the outer corner, and I used the blue on the top lid in the outer corner as well. And then I just sort of tweaked it a bit. So I sort of put a little bit more of that on the top just to sort of mute it down a little bit. And I also used this brown crease color just to sort of blend it out a little bit. So I've sort of got gold, red, blue with a base of sort of your just basic brown. I could have gone really extreme with blue and red look, but I did want to tone this down because I wanted it to be more of a sort of wearable look. And to be honest, since I wasn't sure if I'd used that before, I did use it. But if it wasn't for that reason, I probably would have used this as an inner corner highlight instead, just to, yeah, make the sort of focus be the red and the blue. So hopefully you can see that I mainly used brown. You can see the gold there. You can see the red here, the blue there. And I also put like a burgundy liner on my waterline. It was, yeah, just to sort of set off that red a little bit more, but it is sort of a muted way to use these colors. But you can see that the colors did work pretty well together. Again, if you were to use all blue or all red, I think the colors still would have worked well together, but it would have been a much more bold look. This is a little bit more of a subdued way to mix the colors. Whoops-a-daisy, I just realized that the shade that I missed out on was Penny, not this one down here. Should have looked a bit better. Luckily they look the same anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but I did miss out using one, which was bugger. What a pain in my bum. All right, so after using this palette for just over 2 weeks and creating 8 looks with it, I definitely got a good idea of what I think about this palette. And this was a palette that was super, I had high expectations for. And I'm not going to say I don't like the palette because that's completely wrong. I do like the palette overall, but there are some glaring holes in this palette that the more I think about it, the more it does frustrate me. So it's definitely not a perfect palette, but I'm going to start with the pros because I do think the pros have their strengths, and that's hopefully what I take away from this review is I look at the strengths and I'm like, yeah, I really enjoy this palette, but I'll also explain my frustrations with it. All right, so let's start with the pros. So I actually do really like the pan sizes. I think for Natasha Denona, this is like probably the perfect pan size. I do like getting more shades and less of each shade for my money. Spending the same amount on like half the shades but double the amount just doesn't work for me because rarely do you hit pan on an eyeshadow. And if you do, then it means you really love the palette, which is fantastic, and you get a lot of use out of it. But I still feel like this is like the size that they should all be. Now, when it comes to the shades, I do still see that there's a distinct split between the palette. So you have sort of golds and blues and greens, and you also have oranges and pop of blue with some brown. So I definitely think there's It's sort of like two palettes mushed together. I really like the, look, I'm gonna say, I like the variety of textures in here. So you do have mattes, you do have some sort of more glittery shades, you have more just standard shimmer shades like this one here. You have more of it, you have one duochrome. Would have liked to see some more duochrome. You've got these unusual sort of cream to powder shades. So there are different finishes in here, which is great because I do like different finishes in my looks. It adds to the versatility of the palette, which I really do like. So I do like that. And every shade performed really nicely. So the great thing about it is I was a bit skeptical about these weird cream shades, and surprisingly, you don't realize until you sort of take it home that there are a lot of them. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cream shades. So if they were really horrible formula, that would be such a waste of 10 shades in your palette. So I'm glad that they actually do perform really nicely, and you just use a normal brush and they apply like a normal eyeshadow. They don't really crease, which is good, or on my eyes anyway, they don't really crease over a normal base. I really like that the shimmery shades and the sparkly shades and the duochrome shades don't need glitter glue to adhere. That's something I've noticed from palettes recently, is the shimmers just don't adhere to the eye, whereas these applied really nicely. Not once did I have to reach for a glitter glue, and the mattes are really sort of soft and buttery and nicely pigmented as well. So pretty much everything in here works as it should work, which is fantastic. And it's what you expect from this price point. So I really do like every look I created from this palette. I really do like the quality of the palette. All right, so you might be thinking, with all those praises, what issues do you have, Kat? What are you talking about? And my issues with this palette is that it looks very versatile, but in reality, it's actually not. So what I mean by that is this has just a lot of design flaws in it. I think if you actually took the shades and took them from lightest to darkest, you'll realize how many repetitive shades there are in here. And they might be repetitive just in like the same color, same formula. Like these golds are all very sort of similar. So you could definitely go, okay, how many golds with the same formula do I really need? And that's where you end up. You start using the shades and you start going, wait, these are all sort of very similar on the eye. Do I need them all? And that wasn't even all the golds in there. That was just the 4 that I put on my fingers. Same goes for the orange shades. Okay, we do have some that have very similar formulas. So we've got 2 that have the same cream formulas. 1 is a matte, but once again, how many oranges do you really need that give a matte finish in a palette? They all end up looking very, very, very similar on the eye, or so similar that you can't really tell the difference. And when you see that there is actually sort of like 3 shimmery coppery orange shades as well, you start going, okay, once again, they're different from each other, but do you need them all? My argument would be no. I also find that you get a similar thing with the browns. So again, this is a shimmer and these are creams. But on the eye, yeah, you can add a little bit of nuance to them, but they're very, very similar. So how many do you really need? There's 3 shades there. And also when you sort of blend out the sort of medium cream shade, which is right under that shimmer shade, they're actually the same color. Like you can see that the base color is the same. One just has a slight sheen to it. So do you need them both? Absolutely not. So when you just look at the mere repetition that's happening here, I've got 13 shades on my hand, and arguably I think you would only need maximum 5 out of these to get the same effect on the eye. So when half your palette is repetitive shades, you start going, why are the other ones there? So for me, that is a frustrating element to it. And I think it was very, very limiting with what you could do, because I would go and try to create a different look. And even if no matter what gold I picked up, it sort of had the same effect. No matter what brown I picked up, it sort of looked the same. Like today on my eyes, if I put the matte, it wouldn't have made that much difference. I just went for the shimmer because I hadn't used it on my lid before. So yeah, if you pick up an orange and put one of these 3 colors in the crease, is it going to really distinctly change your look? Probably not. So I find that this is just a very repetitive palette. And if they didn't put all those repeats in, you could have definitely had a lot more variety in here. So another pet peeve that I have with this palette is that there is only technically one light shade. So this does catch the light, so it looks light, but technically it's like a goldy sort of duochrome color. So let's call that just a goldy color. You have one highlight shade. This is more of a, for me, it is a crease color. It's a little bit darker than my skin tone. So if I was to go for a shade that actually highlights my skin, I've got one. And this is not even the best formula. It's sort of like, it's nice, but it's sort of like a satin formula. It's not that exciting. And also if I wanted to vamp up a look, there are only technically 3 dark shades. And what are they? Blue, green, teal. Blue, green, teal. So again, repetitive shades and really boxes you into, if you want to deepen your look, you have to add in one of these colors. And let's swatch these again, because as I showed before, they're very similar. And yes, you can see the differences between them, but also being creams, like I said in a past look, you don't need the 3. You could have something a lot more green than this, so it's more distinct from the blue. And then because they're creams, you can mix them together to create the teal. So for me, again, you didn't need the 3 in there, and I was really missing some variety in the depth of the look. So not only is that limiting with the color, but also you'll notice that they're all the same finish. So they're all that cream to powder finish, which again is great for dark colors because you can use it as a liner, but I would have really liked to have seen a matte sort of powder of a dark brown, or I would have liked to have seen one of these colors be like a really rich, like berry red, like a dark ruby red that could really set off some of these shades. Like, why have the blues there when you can have like a really intense ruby red of this sort of cream shade? I think it would have been awesome, like a burgundy shade. So yeah, I really feel like this palette was mainly just middle shades, metallic, matte, cream middle shades, and then when it really came to finishing the look with either highlight shades or deepening shades, it was just, there was nothing there. So if I was, you know, advising someone on how to redesign this, I would say get rid of a lot of the repetitive shades. You don't need so many golds, you don't need so many oranges, you don't need all these 3 shades. And then I'd say pad out the highlights and the deeper shades to include different finishes from those categories. So for example, if you wanted lighter shades, okay, they don't have to all be this tone. You can have different tones of light shades, but why not have like an iridescent green highlight shade? Why not have a matte cream? Why not have that sort of cream to powder texture in a light sort of champagne or light, I don't know, anything, light orange, light peach color, I don't care. And then when it comes to the deeper shades, you need a lot more of them as well. You've only got 3, they're all the same color, they're all the same finish. I would have loved to have seen a dark, rich red. I would have loved to have seen a dark matte brown. I would have liked to have seen a lot more so you can get a lot more variation and completion out of the look. So I just found that for a palette of 28 shades, I kept noticing the repeats time and time again, but I was also like screaming for some variety in the highlights and the lowlights. So for example, I don't feel like if you're spending this much money and buying a palette with 28 shades, I would have to reach for my Wet n Wild single to use a cream, like cream matte, but I had to. In the future, when I want to use some more of these browns or even colors here and I want to deepen the look to make it a little bit more smoky or to smoke out my eyeliner, I'm probably going to have to reach for a dark brown like this because they just didn't exist in this palette and I don't understand why. So I just feel like it missed some really fundamental balancing shades that would have made this a lot easier to create versatile looks. So those are my pros and cons about the palette. So overall, I do, like I said, I do like it and I do like the color story. I just know that the only way I'm going to reach for this is when I go for something a little bit mid-toned and colorful. I would have liked to have seen this be sort of an everyday palette as well as a colorful palette. And I know that, you know, if you use orange every day, then cool. But I just felt like there was too many gaps for me to want to reach for this every day. And I feel like for the price point and the number of eyeshadows in here, I think you should be able to use it during the day. I think you should be using it at night. I think you should be using it for nude looks, colorful looks, smoky looks, whatever. I feel like it had the potential to offer everything and it just didn't. But what it did offer really well was nice quality. And even on the days where I took time off from this palette, there were parts of me going, oh, I just feel like reaching for this one shade, or I feel like reaching for whatever. And I had to stop myself going, no, if you use it, you have to film a video about it. And I can't be bothered because I'm having a day off. So yeah, I will continue to use this. I will continue to enjoy it. But am I shouting its praises from the rooftops? No. But if you do like the color story, you should really like the formula. It's just that I feel like they could have taken it from being a good palette to a like extremely amazing palette just by tweaking the color story a bit. Because if you did pop all these out, which I don't want to do, and you did line them all up, you'll start realizing the repetitive nature of the shades. And I think that is, yeah, a waste opportunity. And I feel like what they've done, which is really smart, and a lot of brands do this, they jumble up all the shades so you actually can't notice the double ups that you're getting, because I think if they did do it that way, people would be like, what the actual fuck? Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that review. I will be doing another one, probably an Anastasia Beverly Hills one, in the next few weeks. Let me know, I might do a poll in the corner if you want to see the Jackie palette or the Carly Bible palette first, because I do have both of them. And I eventually want to do reviews on both of them, but you know, these things take time. So if you do have a preference, let me know and I will try to do that one next. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.